Imagine looking into the mirror and seeing a version of yourself that doesn't match the reality. One that is shaped by fear, self-doubt, and relentless societal pressure. Now imagine the world reinforcing that illusion, telling yourself that you're not enough. This is the daily reality for millions suffering from people with eating disorders. The National Eating Disorder Association, NEDA, reports that 28 million Americans will suffer from an eating disorder in their entire lifetime. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, someone dies from an eating disorder every 52 minutes. This is known as the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. Despite these staggering numbers, eating disorders are often misunderstood or ignored. They are frequently dismissed as a lifestyle choice rather than the illness, the threatening life illnesses that they truly are. To combat this growing crisis, we must invest in education, early intervention, and policy reforms that ensure better access to dismantling the stigma around eating disorders. Today we will discuss the reality of eating disorders and what they are and how they develop over time. 2, the impact of stigma and the misconception of eating disorders that keeps people from getting treatment. And 3, the urgent reform for education and intervention and policy changes. First, eating disorders are not a choice. The American Psychiatric Association, APA, classifies eating disorders as a very serious mental health disorder, not personality flaws, which is often mistaken. The 3 common types of eating disorders are anorexia nervosa, which is characterized by severe restriction of food intake, and intense fear of gaining weight. The second kind of eating disorder that we're discussing today is bulimia nervosa, and this is defined as binge eating disorder. A lot of us have heard of this, which is followed by purging, which damages our body, not only our teeth, but our internal organs. The third eating disorder that we're going to discuss is the binge eating disorder, which involves reoccurring eating episodes that are uncontrollable, and overall are just like overeating and essentially lead to obesity and metabolic disorders or metabolism. All right, now we're going to talk about what causes eating disorders. Genetics and brain chemistry play a huge role into eating disorders. The National Institutes of Health, NIH, found that 50 to 80% of eating disorders risk is genetic, which is very fascinating. Brain imaging studies reveal that those with an eating disorder have altered dopamine, serotonin responses, impacting their impulse control in the brain and their food-related anxiety. Psychological factors also play a big role. Eating disorders frequently coexist with the anxiety disorder, the post-trauma, the PTSD order, and also depression. Many individuals use eating disorders as a coping mechanism subconsciously for their stress and their trauma that they've endured. Societal influence is also huge. The Facebook and Whistleblower report in 2022 revealed that Instagram's algorithm promotes content that worsens body dissatisfaction among teenage girls, specifically in this study. Unrealistic standards, diets, and the glorification of thinness in the body fuels a very unhealthy relationship with food. If eating disorders are so driven by many complex factors, why are they still seen as a personal choice? The answer is stigma. Stigma is preventing recovery. A common misconception that fuels stigma is eating disorders only affect young women, which is false. The NEDA, the National Eating Disorder Association, confirms that eating disorders affect all people of all races, all gender, and all body types. Binge eating disorder, or known as BED, is the most common eating disorder that overall affects people who have a larger body type. Let's see. One might say people with an eating disorder should just eat normally, which is also a false statement. Let's see. Eating disorders also alter our brain chemistry and our impulse controls, which happen to make recovery a lot more difficult than most would think going into it. It's a lot harder than simply choosing to eat different foods. So the consequences of the stigma is now what we're going to talk about. The NEDA reports that only 1 out of 10, gonna say it again, 1 out of 10 with an eating disorder only receive proper treatment, which is a super alarming statistic. 1 out of 10 only seem to find treatment is because of this stigma. Many medical professionals will even misdiagnose or tend to have a lack of diagnosis of people who really do and are suffering from an eating disorder, but just don't necessarily fit the stereotype and the generic stereotype, essentially. So this stigma also leads to delayed treatment, which in turn, your body is going to deteriorate over time. And with that being said, the mortality rate also increases. All right, my counter argument. Personal responsibility matters, and people can control what they eat. Well, science actually proves that eating disorders are rooted into neurobiology, trauma, and genetics. No one chooses to have an eating disorder, just like no one chooses to have anxiety before a test, or no one chooses to be depressed because of what's going on in their life. So if stigma is stopping people from getting help, what can we do to fix this? The answer lies within our education that we receive about eating disorders, intervention, and policy change. It is crucial that we must prioritize education, policies, and reforms. Prevention starts with education. Schools must incorporate body image awareness programs to teach healthy relationships with food. The Journal of Eating Disorders 2022 found that school-based interventional schools who provided interventions informing on eating disorders had a 35% increase in young women. Next point, expanding access to treatment. Insurance policies must cover all sorts of insurance, and it's really important that everyone receives the same care, especially with a severe mental health disorder like this. The Mental Health Parity Act 2023 says eating disorder treatment needs to be more accessible and mandating all insurance coverage. Our last point is media and social awareness. The U.S. must implement regulations on social media algorithms that promote pro-eating disorder content, opposed to the algorithms that we see on our Instagram and social media pages. The more body diversity campaigns that are being pursued will help maintain and combat the unrealistic standards that we're facing every day. Now to wrap things up, if we want to end the life-threatening eating disorder crisis, we must act now. And I mean now. This means challenging the harmful societal norms, demanding better policies, and supporting those suffering in silence, and to think about what we say before we speak. And on my last note, eating disorders aren't just a personal struggle. They're a public health emergency, and if we fail to act now, we will contribute to lose those lives of a crisis that is entirely preventable. Thank you for listening.